Hi, everybody. This is Josh coming to you from San Francisco. Real quick intro for our speaker today, who I'm really excited to be introducing to Mozilla. With a quick anecdote, when I was a kid, I loved to draw posters. So any science assignment, I didn't care about science, but I wanted to draw a poster. And on one, it was massive, like huge. And I had like elaborate script lettering. I actually designed my own typeface for this. And I was so focused on like creating a beautiful end poster I could like wow my classmates with. I know I made the mistake of dropping a letter from the title of the poster, which made the title of the poster, which I took into my classmates and they quickly pointed out, into a pretty vulgar swear word. 20 years later, I was working on a project, and that project was pretty ambitious. It had a pretty aggressive deadline, had a pretty interesting strategy of build, scale, and differentiate. And the end result, I think, was also analogous to a pretty vulgar swear word. In the midst of that, I got to see a talk by Tom at a very long day of talks at a design event in San Francisco. And his was the only one I actually remembered from that day, because it actually spoke to me on a level, and it really kind of crystallized a lot of things that I was thinking about. And what I've been thinking about, also inspired by Steve Blank and the Lean Startup guys, was that most products don't fail because the teams weren't smart enough to build what they tried to build. They failed because no one wanted what they were building. And that what made for really successful outcomes was the speed with which you learn as a project. You know, you don't go and build the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona your first try. You see that church, but the church is the output of like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very elaborate prototypes. Small, low-cost, highly efficient efforts to validate your thinking before you scale up and build the big thing. So it's not build, scale, differentiate. It's learn, then scale. Very fundamental. It's just the way that we can succeed in tech at Mozilla and no matter who we are at Mozilla as well. So here to talk more about this today is Tom, our speaker. Tom has got a pretty amazing background he's going to tell you about. Founded GoogleX, has worked with very large organizations all over the world, very distinguished background, and just a really great talk. Again, I've heard this before. I'm really excited to hear it again. It's just a great talk, and it's very relevant to what we do and how we do it. So thanks very much, and please give a warm welcome to Tom.
Not to totally ruin it, but I changed it a bunch since you heard it, so it might be terrible now. Very good. So, great. As mentioned in the introduction, I was on the founding team of GoogleX. In particular, I headed up the product experience team, so I hired, who did I hire? The user experience people, user research, mechanical engineers, industrial designers, and a couple other folks. And then over a couple years, we built a bunch of crazy stuff that's on the screen. But I think most of you guys have heard about a bunch of crazy stuff that's been built. I think what's more interesting is what are the kind of thought processes that went into how we did our work? Because actually, I guess this is probably a valuable aside. I think when people see GoogleX from the outside, they think that, well, the reason that they can succeed is they have all these brilliant people and they can throw so much money at the thing, and they probably have like 1,000 people on every single thing. But I will show you very shortly, but like a couple, top lines on this. It wasn't for any of those reasons. Like for Google Glass, 3 people built 150 hardware prototypes in 10 weeks for $20,000. So that's not like a lot of people, and it's not a lot of money, and it's not a lot of time, right? It's none of the things that you would assume. And for Project Loon, it was 5 people, 4 months, $70,000, over 100 prototypes, and by the end of that time, we had multiple balloons in the air doing laser line of sight, high bandwidth communication. So it wasn't the money, it wasn't the number of people. It was actually just the way that we worked. Now, how do you understand the way that we work? I kind of couch these as what I call like mental debugs. First debug is the idea of guessing versus direct experience. So on my first day of work, I showed up, but there was nothing like this. In fact, the brief for Google Glass wasn't even the brief for Google Glass. What it was like a half-page document from Larry and Sergey that said, what if Google was in your brain? Which sounds super nefarious, but that's not really what they meant. What they meant by that is, what if, as soon as you wanted to know something, you would know it? That's what they mean by what if Google was in your brain. And they said, make that possible within, a couple years. So like we set out like thinking about, well, what could possibly technologically, make that viable. And very quickly, folks came up with the idea of the heads-up display. Now, this is my first day of work, first meeting of my first day of work. And I had left this executive position at Yahoo where even though it's like sounds high and mighty and I was moving around a multi-billion-dollar P&L, it was really just a bunch of meetings and politics. So I was really happy to get to Google because I was like, okay, I'm actually going to build things. It's going to be super exciting. It's not going to be like all these meeting and politics where a bunch of people just posture at each other. But actually within that first meeting, I was kind of disappointed because we came up with this idea, okay, well, heads-up display, but then half of that initial 90-minute meeting that morning was arguing what color the heads-up display should be. I was like, okay, this is like crazy. Like none of us have spent very much time with any heads-up displays, and like we're all passionately arguing about like what the right color is. And at the end of the day, like the normal thing happens. Like the people that win this argument are either the people that are best at arguing or the people with the highest title in the room. And on that particular morning is the same person as Sergey Brin. And he basically told us in no uncertain terms that the color of the heads-up display had to be red. And like the reason that it had to be red was that red photons are the least energetic, so it's the least strain on the retina. So physics-wise, that is true. And the other reason it had to be red is that it's always red in science fiction. There is some other justification. Science fiction writers are really smart, and if so many smart people have all said that it should be red, then how could they all be wrong, and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I kind of left the meeting that morning like not that satisfied with that answer. I was like, okay, I call these sorts of events guessathons. It's a bunch of people in a meeting room. None of them have had the direct experience. They're all guessing what the right direct experience is. And the more they guess at it, the more certain they are that their guess is absolutely right. And, this is why this debug is called guessing versus direct experience. I set out that day in order to just kind of make it so that we could have the direct experience. So this is the first day of work. Yeah, usually I have like this interactive part. I can do it. Well, how long do you think it took before we all had the direct experience of using the heads-up display? Don't answer if you already know the answer. Great. Well, that's fine. It was that afternoon. So over here, that's a guy you might recognize, and he's wearing a thing that I made for that afternoon, and this kind of schematic of it is right next to it. So it's a piece of plexiglass that holds a little sheet protector that you can project onto, a little piker projector over here. And then the magic ingredient is the coat hanger, because like one end of it hangs off of your neck and the other one rests on your chest, and it makes a very kind of stable screen that's in front of you as you walk around. And then using a netbook, you can project whatever you want onto this screen. Now, what this allowed us to do, like as soon as this is built, I made a paragraph of text, put it in all the different colors of the rainbow so you could flip through and like see what it's like to read a paragraph of text in pretty much every color. And literally in like a minute or two, everybody that tried this rig was like, red is the absolute worst color for a heads-up display. It's not even close. And actually, it's the worst for the reason that Sergey said it would be the best. The red photons are least energetic. They're hardest to discriminate against the background. So whatever. Sounded good. Now, what we also found out was, okay, red was the worst. Purple, but it was the worst by far. Purple was the second worst, but, you could kind of read it. And then the best were white, light blue, and yellow. Now, in that 90-minute meeting in the morning, like what argument could you possibly have had that would have resulted in that level of understanding of the different colors? Just as impossible. Like you can't even imagine an argument that would lead to that much confidence and understanding in the actual colors. And that's the difference between direct experience and guessing, right? In direct experience, within a minute, you're like, yeah, this is awesome, or terrible. And like with guessing, it's like, well, didn't you hear me? And my argument makes so much sense. And like, you guys aren't paying attention. You can spend a long time on that, much longer than the minute it might take to just experience it and be like, red is miserable. All right. Debug number 2. So this is the idea of creating a prototyping tool chain. So and it's the idea of design for adaptability versus design for efficiency or design for scalability. So as technical people, we're always told it's like we got to think about scalability from day one. You got to be ready to scale. You got to go. So scalability, efficiency. That's all we spend time engineering for. But I will put out there that there's another possible, attribute to design for, engineer for, which is adaptability. So an example of this is once we all had heads-up displays, which wasn't that many months into the project, then we're all walking around and it's like, well, now we got this stuff in our eye, how do we navigate it? And like you would expect, there was a gajillion suggestions on how to create like the menu structure, the navigation structure, and so on and so forth. And a lot of this was being programmed in Android. And the first one or two of them, like the dev team was like, well, we'll just build it. We'll just build that navigation scheme. And they like went heads down, and it would take them like 4 or 5 weeks. And it's like, well, we got it done. And then we would try it out, and it was like, it was terrible. And I was like, okay, well, this is a really bad approach to figuring it out, because right now we have like 50 different ideas for how to do the navigation. And it took us like 4 to 5 weeks to do one of them. So if you do 50 times 5, and then you divide that by 52 weeks in a year, that's a really long time before we actually know what we're up to. So what we did instead is we built a really simple tool chain. And my rule of thumb is that any experimental form that you're going to repeat more than 3 times, build a tool chain for. So what we built in this case, simple way to import a bunch of static screenshots, and then they would appear as these little squares inside of this web interface. And then we would drag little arrows between these screens and then be able to label the arrows with what touchpad action would transition from one of the screens to another one of the screens. So literally, as soon as you drew up some screens, you could toss it up here and draw the arrows between it within about 15 minutes. And after you drew the arrows between them, you could click upload to device, and it would upload this whole pack of screens and the transitions between them up to your device. And then pretty quickly you could be like, oh, open menu. Okay, swipe down goes down a level. Swipe up, oh, we learned that swipe up sucks because it pushes your glasses up. We actually did learn that happened. It's like people were flipping their glasses up. But it's like, by doing that, actually, we could try a dozen navigation schemes every single day. Now, was it fully interactive? No. I mean, these were obviously static screenshots that represented the transitions that were going to go happen upon swiping forward or swiping back or swiping down or swiping in a circle or what have you, right? But like, it allowed us to get the feel for what it would be like. Okay, trigger, bring up the camera viewer. Okay, take a shot, right? Versus bring up the camera viewer, take a shot. So these sorts of things actually allowed us to become very familiar and comfortable with, dozens of navigation schemes and kind of narrow it down to like the top 3 or 4, which we then built out in greater fidelity over slightly more weeks. But if you think about that, instead of something that might take 5 years if you were to code them all independently, we got it done in about 5 weeks. All right, another debug. So this is the idea of staying in the medium. So my wife is a painter, and this is a painting that she did of the Marin Headlands. And if you think about the way that a painter works, then a painter is constantly in their medium. Like an oil painter is in the medium of oil paint all the time. Now, imagine, though, you were an oil painter, but whenever you wanted to go do a brush stroke, you had to stop, write a specification, have a bunch of spec review meetings, have people like accept the things that are in the spec review, argue with the dev manager, agree to get 20% of it built, have that go for a while, have a QA cycle, and then at the end of that, like QA says it's okay, you get to do a brush stroke. Well, it would be a little bit hard to create a masterpiece with that style of work, but this is really what we do all the time, right? There's like the little Bermuda Triangle of ideas where you go back and forth and what's actually going to be in the spec. Then finally you get your specification and there's a little triage vortex. It's like, well, we don't have time to build that yet, but it's like, but this is essential. You can't do this without that. Well, just tell me which is higher priority. It's like, no, I mean, they really both need to exist. Well, too bad. And then you put it in there and it ends up being, I don't know, I guess our regular lives. So I challenged this a little bit for a couple different reasons, besides the fact that the iteration speed is incredibly slow. So like, you can't really see the painting coming together, right? I mean, the reason that painting works is I do a brush stroke and I can see the result. And if it's like the wrong color, I can take out the palette knife and scrape it off. Or if it's pretty close, but I just want to texture it, I can bring out another brush and start texturing it, right? The feedback is pretty much immediate. It's like, here's the painting, gets like this. Now, the difficulty about this, besides just having a lot of blocks in it, is that the feedback is nothing close to immediate. Some ideas happen like, 4 or 5 weeks prior, and then the people that were probably in the room generating those ideas are not even a part of this second chunk of things. So by the time something like a brushstroke actually goes onto the painting, they're not even there to go see it. There's like no way to like cognitively complete the gesture of what you were trying to do in the first place. So, and I actually have this challenge for pretty much everybody who is in software. I think what most people that are developers think is that their medium is the programming language they use or the lines of codes that they write. And what designers think their medium is space and type and color and form and visual hierarchy and vectors and pixels. But I challenge all of you guys, your medium is none of those things. If you work on software, your medium is human behavior in the real world. And if you are not seeing human behavior in the real world very often, you are not looking at your painting. And if you try to make a great painting without ever looking at your painting, you got lots and lots of problems beyond these sorts of problems, right? So what does it look like to go look at human behavior in the real world? Actually, I purposely made a very short presentation so that we could just like talk about this stuff real quick, and then we're just going to show you how to do it like at the end of that. All right, so I will pick that up very shortly. Fourth debug, research versus development. So this is basically a summary of what the innovation process looks like. You start out, actually, I guess I'm not on the mic if I do that. So you start out in the unknown, and this is, I drew it too light, but this is like a little time axis going from left to right on the bottom. You start out at the beginning in the unknown, and after a certain amount of time, there's a range of possible outcomes that you can hit. And really all the rapid prototyping process and like the process that we did in GoogleX was this process. It's research and then development. And most people say these words in like one sweep as if they're really one concept. But not only are research and development not the same thing, they are opposite things from each other. Because what development is development is all this stuff that they teach you in school. In school, they teach you, given a certain amount of time and these fixed resources, go narrow and deep on this very specific thing and bring it over the finish line. That's what it is to develop something. It's like, oh, don't get distracted by this. Oh, that's a lower priority feature. No, get narrow and deep, get really focused. And that means development intrinsically is a narrow and deep discipline. Research is literally the opposite discipline. It is not narrow and deep, it is broad and shallow. It says, in the shortest amount of time possible, hit the widest range of possible outcomes, right? It literally takes the opposite form of development. And this is what we were doing. I mean, why would you build 150 hardware prototypes of Google Glass in that little time? It's because we wanted to hit a huge range of things. We had like one-eyed versions and two-eyed versions and versions with lasers on them and so on and so forth. And this is a funny story. Like, this is not really in the literature anywhere, but there's a point. Have you guys seen, like, at Brookstone, they have those laser-projected Bluetooth keyboards? They look pretty cool. Now, imagine you had one of those on a pair of glasses. Or you walk up to anything and start typing. Well, I thought this was a freaking great idea. And I was like, well, we don't have a keyboard on Google Glass, so let me go make one of these. So, one day I pulled aside, hacked one apart, got it onto a pair of glasses, and I'm like, this is amazing. Because I would it took me a couple hours to get to go. But it's like, I walked up to a surface and I was like, oh, this is great. And I walked up to a wall and I was like, oh, this is great. And of course, this was all done in isolation at my lab bench. But I was like, as soon as this was going, 6 p.m. and I called a bunch of folks over and I was like, guys, you got to check this out. This is freaking amazing. So they come over and I walk up to the desk and it's like, you see that keyboard? And they're all nodding. Like, yeah. And it's like, well, I'm typing. You can't see in my eye. Some stuff's happening. And then I was went up to the wall and they're doing that and everybody's nodding. And I was like, isn't that amazing? And when I looked over, everybody was like, ah! Now, when you think about it for a second, this should be kind of obvious, but I shot a bunch of lasers in their eyes. And very low power, everybody is fine. But you think about it as a impassioned maker of a thing, what was I thinking in the 2.5 hours up until that point? I was just like, this is such a fucking good idea the entire time. And was so excited. It's oh, I finally did the beam break. I'm seeing a character. Awesome. And it's I was so into well, how are you going to hack it? How are you going to get it to work? that I missed the very obvious thing that if you have any friends, you may lose them very quickly. So, great. And then you can get fancy. You can turn on a forward-facing camera, and when you do face detection, you can automatically turn off your laser shit. But in truth, it's really expensive to have a forward-facing camera running all the time for face detection. And you run out of power halfway in the sentence. So it's not practical, even though there's still technical workarounds. But think about it. It's like you have this kind of technical energy and pride that's going into the thing, and how little you end up seeing. It actually, in retrospect, it's so obvious you're going to shoot lasers in people's eyes, but you're not going to find out until you do it. All right, so last debug, and then we are going to go to Q&A and just show you how to do some stuff. So I call this improving your personal runtime. So I have this thing that every Friday I will go and write the 3 to 5 things that I accomplished in the week. And then I have a column on the right-hand side that says 10% better. And I challenge myself the following week to try an experiment that will make this thing that I did, the way that I did it, 10% better the following week. And this is a debug on a couple different things. It basically, a lot of times we stop improving because something gets good enough. It's good enough, so just put that away and never think about it again. And actually, it turns out there's lots and lots of things that can be improved beyond getting good enough. And actually, a lot of these rapid prototyping techniques came from getting to something good enough and challenging myself to make it 10% better. The other reason that 10% technique is a really interesting mental debug is outside of the situation where it's good enough and you're satisfied, there's also the situation where you're not even close. So, for example, I just got a cello. I'm a musician, and I play a lot of different instruments, but I never played the cello. So I just got a cello, but I suck at the cello, right? So this is great, but I don't sit there and say, well, I suck at the cello, I'm never going to be good at it. And this is what happens with a lot of folks. It's they start this project, it's oh, we're trying to do this, and we're not even close, we're never going to be good at it, and they're just so disheartened they don't even keep going. Right? So the 10% technique is also great because I suck at the cello. But how did I suck at the cello this week? Can I be 10% less sucky next week? Right? And it's okay, instead of sounding terrible, like you're murdering a horse, it will sound a little bit less, like you are slightly stabbing a horse. And then maybe next time it'll be like you are, I don't know, irritating a horse. And then eventually I'll get to, okay, it's a horse at rest. And that still doesn't sound good, but it's it will be 10% better. Eventually, I'll play the cello. This is my belief about it. Another way to improve your personal runtime. So, like I said, I'm a musician, and that's looks like a terrible photo, but I just wanted to take a real photo of what it was actually like. So, as a musician, I write a lot of music, but I was finding that within a particular time period, I had been writing a lot less music than before. And I did this thing. I started a stopwatch, and I said, okay, start. How long does it take me to actually get recording? So I pressed the stopwatch, and I went there, and I was okay, plug in this guitar, turn on this thing over here, turn on these keyboards, effects processors. Oh, this thing's over here. This is not even plugged in anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then open up my multi-track recorder, blah, blah, blah. And it's okay, it was 11 minutes. I was so if I had an inspiring idea and I actually wanted to jot it down, instead of what you do with a piece of paper and just jot down an idea, you it would take me 11 minutes to get that first sound into a thing. So instead, I centralized all of my music equipment onto just 2 power strips. And then I cleaned up the digital pathway too relative to my recording equipment so that it was all set up you just double click one thing. You can write some scripts. And basically, now if I want to record something, reach down with my foot, turn on the power strip, double click that thing, and it's 15 seconds and you're recording. Right? And I think in our lives, there's a lot of things where we really want to be doing it all the time and we really want to be good at it, but we actually have we have a crappy latency on our runtime. And we don't really think about that as that. It's whoa, I need to get into that mode. So I'm going to open these windows and go do this over here, and I pull out these things. And it's no, it's super slow. If you really wanted to be in the medium in a short amount of time, you would just make it flip the switch, double click this thing, I'm in there, it's recording. All right, so that's it. Now we are going to take some questions, and then we'll just demo doing this thing. All right, any questions?
Hello. So also, we can take questions in the room, and for those of you tuning in, I know there's a lot of you tuning in, please use Air Mozilla IRC to submit some questions there.
That's it. There's no questions. This is over here.
Anyone? Okay.
Is this on? Yeah.
That's already brought his own mic. That's
yeah. So the bit at the end about like improving your iteration time, and so how do you? I guess I can imagine getting into a position where you spend too much time designing the optimal, like, press a button and start recording setup, and like wasting time rather than improving time. How do you evaluate that and like try to predict how much time you're going to sink into something like that before you jump into it? I guess.
think what happens is, because you can't go lower than 0 seconds, then you end up having a bound to it. So like you're there and it's like, okay, I like did it and I took it down from 3 minutes to 30 seconds. And then it's like, well, if it took me, half an hour of work to go from 3 minutes to 30 seconds, that's pretty good. But if I'm now taking like 2 hours of work to go from 30 seconds to 28 seconds, then you're like, that's less good. And then at some point you're going to be like, I can't go less than 0. I mean, actually, at the end of the day, a lot of these things like get down to like the 10-second range. And it's like that 10 seconds is, well, I physically need to move back to the multi-track recorder. So unless like I like, change space-time, so I'm like, bloop, then like I can't get rid of that 8 seconds. I like flip this thing and I have to walk to this thing. So like there's some point where it will become practically apparent when you're down in the sub-minute range where it's like, yeah, this is fine. So, okay, another question. Yes.
Hello, okay.
All right.
So I like the idea of prototyping, but one thing that I find out when we're developing, we're like, oh, this is a great idea, and we start building it, and we think it's awesome, we try it out, but we realize that we are not our users, and so it's a very different audience that actually ends up using it. We end up being more power users who understand the implementation, and we find out it's terrible when you actually deliver it. So do you have any strategies for prototyping for a different user base? User research studies seem to be expensive and take a long time.
I did not plan to show this, but I will show this right now. It's this is like what the weekly work schedule is for most of my teams. And where did you go, weekly work schedule? You're in here somewhere. This part's boring. Okay, here we go. So all the blue stuff is time when you can actually do work. Then there's only 2 meetings that are required. There's Monday meeting in order to coordinate what the hell we're going to do. And then there's a Friday meeting for reflection and gratitude. So not many other meetings. And then those big orange blocks on Tuesday and Thursday, that's us in front of our customers. And it seems crazy that you would allocate, 4 to 6 hours every single week to be in front of your customers. But what we find is that making it like that makes it so that you're always at most 1 day away from a customer test. And it makes it so that most arguments, instead of being very long, is like, well, we have a test tomorrow, so we put it in the test. So like we will spend 4 to 6 hours on user tests in a week, but like the, anecdotally what folks on my team report is we save about 15 hours of arguing. So like, net, you gain 10 hours in the week by doing that. Now, you're right. The way that most people do user research is slow and expensive, right? And given that, like, you make it like a special exception. It's like, oh, I'll have dessert today. I'll have user research today. It's like, it's like this special thing that comes at the end. And like, I think if you make it special and you make it at the end, then you're going to do it much less, because it's not as tasty as dessert. So what you need to do instead is you need to make it like consistent, so like, and like, when I did this in Yahoo, we called them rolling studies, right? Every Wednesday, 8 customers would come in. And they'd be like, 8 customers would come in to test what? It's like, to test whatever we have, right? And that's just a different mindset on things, that like you are dedicated enough to the customer that it's just going to happen. It's just going to happen. And did it mean that on some Wednesdays we didn't have our stuff totally together and we just had to like go paper prototype style with them? Absolutely. That's fine. But I'd rather have like some user tests which were a little less effective and other ones that were awesomely effective, but be doing it every single week, than to make it a special exception where it's like, oh, after we build this thing for 10 weeks and we're super excited about it as power users, we put it in front of people and now our worlds are ruined. It's like, that's terrible. Like the amount of ruin you can get to just having a customer test every other day is very low, right? Like you can only commit so much code that gets ruined by that test. And it's not really being ruined, it's being improved by the test. It's like that's you getting to see the painting for the first time, right? And like most of us paint blind for 10 weeks, and then we're like, oh, well, nobody likes my painting, and this is actually the first time I saw it. Okay, that's crazy. But like this just makes you see your painting all the time. Now, how do you go make it cheap? A thing that we actually really do, especially for things that are business to consumer, and you guys actually mostly work on business to consumer things, is that we go to the mall. So we take an Uber trip to the mall, and then the mall is great because the mall like has broken every single demographic up by store. So like if you want to go meet, women over 35, then you go to Ann Taylor. If you want to go meet some teenagers, you can go to Hot Topic. If you want to get general population, you can go to the food court. Actually, if you want to get general population, you can also go to the DMV, which is amazing because everybody is stuck and there's nothing better to do than to look at your software. So like your hit rate in the DMV is incredible, right? Like pretty much everybody will talk to you in the DMV. Sometimes in the mall, they're hanging with their friends and they're onto a thing, and maybe half of people will talk to you in the mall. But in DMV, like 90% of people will talk to you because they look at you and they look at their number and then they're like, yeah, I'll talk to you. It's really nothing else to do. And it's a general population slice because everybody has to go there. So like you'll meet everybody. It's like we've met startup founders and rich people and just regular people, and I was like, this is awesome. Like we can just show you anything. So don't make it a special occasion. It's like sometimes that orange block is we all get into an Uber and go to the mall, and it just like gives you this type of discipline around seeing what you're creating. All right, any other questions?
One more from IRC here. Ricardo asks, did you embrace Stanford's D-School approach to solving a problem? If not, what design methodology did you use?
This is great. Like people often ask this. It's like, what about Lean and what about D-School and that sort of thing? And I've met Eric Ries and I know George Kemble, who founded the Stanford D-School, really well. And actually, I'll add a twist to it, which is like a lot of times people are like, well, why is this better or why is this worse than Lean Startup or D-School or whatever? But in truth, the people that are deep practitioners of this stuff, we don't argue with each other at all. It's like, when I was hanging with George, he's like, dude, you got to come in and facilitate some of my sessions because you have some crazy shit. And I was like, okay, yeah. And it's like, go in there and change. It's like, that was amazing. That was mind-blowing. And it's like, awesome. And it's like, let me sit on your stuff. And it's like, I'm loving this about what you're doing, and I see like how this would work in a thing. Like, we're just like trading tips. So to me, it's like, what this is actually like is when anybody's a deep practitioner. So like, if you find two guitarists who have been playing guitar for like decades of their life, they're not like, I'm the absolute best, man. I have the best music of all time. Very rarely, Jack Black. But like outside of that, it's like they're like, no, this is amazing. Like, look at that. Like this picking technique is amazing that you have. I really like the feel that you have on that thing. Show me that thing. So that's really what's happening amongst the folks that do this. I can go into a bunch of particular like tweaks and differences and whatever, but the most part we feel like colleagues, right? We're just like, that's amazing. How do I do some of that? And your thing's amazing, so I want to borrow some of this. So that's actually what it's like amongst the folks that have done this for a long time.
And then maybe one more, and an introductor's prerogative on this one, but can you speak to team makeup? We work at Mozilla with people who work on the deepest platform pieces and tend to like to be a little bit kind of left alone. They've got very deep technical work to do. And you've got people who are more on the rapid iteration side, are more comfortable in that space. And just, I'm curious what you've found is effective in terms of team makeup, and whether you found there are ways to integrate people who have that kind of like very deep research, deep implementation mindset.
Yeah.
If you can bring them into it, and if it's effective to bring them into that rapid iteration process.
Well, it absolutely is important. Like really, no matter who you are, unless somehow there's no human beings that are served by what you're doing, then there is a customer. And that customer, if you're like you're writing a kernel piece, then your customer might be developers that want to go use, your system. If you're writing like a deep stack piece, it might be, DevOps people, right? This is great. So it's like there is somebody who's served by what you're doing. And like, that orange block would then be hanging with DevOps twice a week and being like, oh, here's some of the latest stuff I've built, and like here's how I'm thinking about redoing the stack, and like I think this will give us like way lower latency on this, and like it'll make it easier to scale throughput in these ways. And then DevOps folks were like, "Oh, this is awesome, man." It's like, well, can I try it this? Or, oh, can we make it so it's like this? Oh, can I monitor in this way? Oh, I haven't thought about monitoring in that way. Okay, let me make a hook. Do you just want to write it out to logs, or do you want me to do something special with it? It's like, oh, writing to logs is fine. We have a script on our logs. Good. Boom. So like, I think it actually works for everything. It's just that we have a mythology that's like, oh, you're working so deep down, then you're going to be in like some cave. But at the end of the day, if your code ever affects any human lives, then those are the human lives that are in the orange blocks here. Okay, I think that's one more question, or we should just show it, right? This is good. Like the question should be like, give me like a real thing that's broken, and let's fix it right now. Because, yes.
Yeah, so to that end, the idea here is that we're going to, if someone wants to volunteer and just talk a little bit about kind of their team and their process, we have the benefit of Tom's expertise just to talk through what you're going through on your team and different ways you might actually approach the problem to actually debug the problem. And what I want to throw out here, too, is that everything we're talking about here is not limited to technology. If you've worked in marketing, a lot of this should sound pretty familiar, too, testing messages before you deploy them. If you're working in any kind of internal team, you don't want to scale out a massive new payroll system before you actually test it with people. So I'd encourage anyone, if you, maybe multiple people, but we have an opportunity here to kind of engage in a bit of a back and forth with Tom about the way we do things here on your particular teams and the ways in which you might improve them. So if anyone wants to be brave and volunteer.
It's not brave, it's super fun. Everybody who's like sitting down there, they're being brave by not being fun. You guys are all scared of fun. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm Mike. I work on the Firefox or Android team. And so typically our process is, so I guess one of my problems is I'm not part of at the product meetings as frequently as I should be based on this talk, and I think I agree with that. So the ideas generally come down from product or the developer ideas, and then when we have the resources being engineers, we have people to build it, we kind of build things that we're passionate about. It's some of the ideas also kind of stem from what the larger desktop product is doing. So desktop might have some ideas and like, oh, that sounds good, but there isn't as much coordination between that as I would like. So we kind of spin our own process in that way. Do you have specific guiding questions that could be?
So here's the first observation, which is everything that you said was about how your team works, right? So that's cool because I think maybe part of the setup of the prompt was kind of like that. But like we're going to go and change it up a little bit, which is you do Firefox on Android. So tell me a real place in space and time that a human being uses Firefox on Android.
Everywhere?
Yeah, but get specific.
So let's go with the mall because people are waiting for their friends to come out of the store. And so they pull out their phone and they go on the internet.
Okay, so get up here. Let's go. Let's do it. Who else wants to be in the mall today? Somebody. Malls are getting less crowded, but there should be at least one other person in the mall. Come on up. Anybody? You want to come up? Here we go. So great. Where are you in the mall?
I am outside Hot Topic.
Okay. Is there really a line for Hot Topic? There's kind of not.
My
so
friends are inside.
Imagine these little circle things are like little displays inside of Hot Topic, right? Okay. Now pull out your phone because you're using Firefox on Android, and like make it real to me. Like, what would you be checking?
Well, I like to look up things that I will consider doing later. And
you can be the store owner. Just go. Actually, you can stand behind the kiosk. That's looking like a store counter.
Well, that's also a good example. I also research the products that I might be buying for like better prices and things like that. Like
great. So you're in Hot Topic and you're seeing all sorts of stuff. So you're browsing around. And now you're popping up a thing to go compare some prices because you're like, this fur collar seems like a little expensive. Right? So, no, it's good. Just do it.
Right.
And then it's like, well, great. What happens? Now, right now, you're just using a browser. What is it about Firefox on Android that's going to be different, interesting, valuable to you in a real-world setting? So just posit it to me.
Well, I guess by making the things that I want to do more convenient. It's faster, so improving the runtime, so to speak. So when I open it, and if I'm trying to compare prices, it should just do that, right?
Okay, so great. So I think that's like the high-level overview. So let's make it a little bit more concrete. What got faster that changes your life right now?
What do you mean?
Well, you said that you're going to go change Firefox on Android in a way that's going to go improve people's personal runtime. Well, it needs to take a specific instantiation in the world, right?
Yeah.
So you're in Hot Topic right now trying to go compare some prices. What is it in Firefox that's going to go change your runtime right now? Like, what's going to happen?
Okay. Well, I think, so maybe this is thinking way too outside the box, but if it could infer that where you are and then make some decisions about what should be open or what should be shown based on that. So for example, if you're in the mall, perhaps they'll have some suggestions of, oh, maybe you should check this out, or maybe if we can find out you're in Hot Topic, maybe you'd be like, here's Hot Topic's price list. And
great, so this is cool. So walk outside of the store. Come on back outside the store. Cool. Now we're going to go live in the world. You're still the store clerk, don't worry. We didn't get to do anything fun yet, but it's about to happen. So you're walking into the store. Mm-hmm. So just like walking in the store like Hot Topic. Like, I don't know. Do you look at your phone when it buzzes?
Oh, yes. I thought I broke the
sensor. You don't need to, but it's like you might. And so like let's say that happens, and it's like, whoops. On this Post-it note is like, yo, here's all this crazy shit in Hot Topic you should check out. Okay, no, so just like pretend this is happening to you and tell me how you would actually feel. Don't pretend that you're somebody who works at Mozilla that is excited about all features. Like imagine what would actually happen if you were, 20-year-old in the mall walking into Hot Topic, your phone buzzes and you see a bunch of products.
I guess with my personal biases, I would probably be like, oh, this is a little annoying, unless there were things I actually cared about.
Okay, well, good. So you already learned something. So it's like, it's going to be a little bit annoying unless it's super personally relevant, right? So let's scoot back a step. So you're back out of the store, scoot back 3 steps. We're just rewinding time. This is good. And like, what's happening here is your products don't really happen in the code. Your products happen in the real world. So like, if your line of code does not change some real behavior in the real world, nothing happened. That's like the tree that fell in the forest or whatever. People are still debating that. Like that's how little happened. So what we're trying to get to here is a feature is not really a feature. A feature is like connected through all these little lines of force to human behavior in the real world. And like whether your feature is successful is not whether you coded it well and whether it runs really fast, and like whether it's successful is whether these little lines of force change the world in a way that people are very excited about or they're annoyed by, right? So we just learned that if he was actually 20-year-old coming in the store, the phone buzzes, they're probably like, oh yeah, that's probably my friend texting me because she's supposed to meet me up. Oh fuck, it's Hot Topic trying to tell me to buy shit. Fuck you, right? Like that's an important point in time. Right? Because could somebody go spend a lot of time on like a geo-fenced, like shopping assistant feature? Yeah, that could take a lot of time to code. But in all honesty, like what are we trying to go change in human behavior? Now, the reason I got you back out of the store is we could imagine a different world where when you're browsing online with Firefox and you're doing online shopping on like Amazon or you're visiting the Hot Topic site or whatever, there's like a little palette of things that are coming up on the side like a not quite shopping cart or something. And then maybe in the process of seeing that, you're like, oh yeah, keep me alerted on those things, or this is the stuff that I want to like put on my wish list or whatever. Now, if that had existed and then you came in here and it's like, burn, it's like, oh damn, the stuff on my wish list is on sale. Well, that's kind of different, right? That like now we're talking about lines of force which feel different than, oh, I just made a thing that was so I'm positing a slightly different world, but like what you would try to do is then act out that world. So let's act out that world. Now the store clerk is hopefully going to do something. So walk into this world.
Okay. Oh, things on my wish list are on sale. Really cool.
Okay, just hold on a second. So he said it in a super fakey way. And I'm going to challenge it a little bit because here's where this technique comes in. So like imagine I was like let's say we're all like in the movie business,
And imagine I came to you and I like pitched a crazy new movie idea. I was like, I got the best idea for a movie. Like two people like meet near the beginning and they like fall in love, but you're not totally sure if they fall in love, but then they get separated. And then for like most of the movie, like all these hijinks are happening. And right at the end, they get back together and they fall in love. Is this an amazing movie or what? And it's like, well, you can't really tell. I mean, some of the best movies in the world have had that plot, and many of the worst movies in the world have had that plot. So when you keep things really abstract, then you can never tell what the hell is up. And this is how we argue most of our features. It's like, yo, think about this concept. Everybody's going to love, like, personalize this. And it's like, sure, man, that could be the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. It just depends on how it goes. Now, how do we decide what movies to watch? We don't just have somebody pitch us a concept. Two people meet and they might fall in love. That's lame. What we do is we watch a 30-second trailer. And when we watch the 30-second trailer, we're like, no chemistry, screw that. You know, or not a believable plot line. Nobody would ever say that. That's a very fake-sounding script. You know, why is this hot tub a time machine? Like, we have these thoughts, and we're like, okay, right? Like, I'm going to see this or not see this based on the trailer. So this is why I'm challenging a little bit on the fakey words, right? Because when I hear the fakey words, this is me watching the trailer and not believing that this movie could happen. Right? So scoot back in time, and like, look, here's the thing. If every time you try this, it comes out fakey because you cannot imagine somebody saying, oh yeah, like using the Firefox shopping assistant, like, you know, I have this on my list or whatever, it just sounds too contrived, you probably have a crappy movie, right? And like, maybe you don't want to build that feature. But like, the reason that we live through these things instead of cogitating through them is you can convince yourself of anything when you cogitate through it. But when you see it lived, you're like, no, that's not a real script. Okay, so let's try it again, and let's try to be real. In character, what's your motivation? Go for it.
Oh, okay. I actually wanted that. I think it's on sale. Great. Wow. Where would it be? Oh, hello. I was actually looking for this item here. I see it's on sale. Oh, great.
That was real. Sorry, keep going.
Oh, no thank you, but I will take this item. Thanks.
Great. And like, think about what just happened there, right? Like when we put the lines of force back into the real world, a lot of interesting things happen. And actually, I love the fact that you offered the members discount, and he said no, because that was super real. Like when somebody's pitching a new feature, it's like, imagine this, and then we have all these biz dev tie-ins and all these member discounts, and we're going to make so much money off of so-and-so. It's like, well, in truth, somebody comes in, it's like, member just, no, maybe not today. That's like what really happens. On the slide deck, it sounds like this is going to be an awesome secondary revenue source that's going to give us repeat revenue from all the and it's like, okay, yeah. Or people are going to be like, you annoyed me 10%, but I still bought your thing. Is like another way that might happen. Now, like, you gotta go see it happen, though, because this is actually what your features are. Products are actually not in the code. Products are actually in the world, right? Like, if your product modifies nothing about the world, you have no product. So, like, in order to go understand whether your product or your feature or whatever is any good, you gotta get back in the world. Now, most of the time, people like go and shorthand this by talk to your customers. But you can actually probably see and feel the difference between what just happened here versus just having an interview with a customer, right? Like, the reason that there's a difference is that human beings, the human mind doesn't reason just with thoughts. It's actually kind of very poor at reasoning with thoughts. The human mind mostly reasons with time, space, and matter. I was a physicist, so that's why I think everything is that. But anyway, it is all that. But like, what does it look like for the human mind to go compute with those things? Well, I have a phrase that about 90% of your thoughts are determined by the social and environmental context that you are in before you have your first thought. And this is very easy to demonstrate. Like, if you're in a room with one other person, you behave differently than when you're in a room with 10 other people, and then 100 other people. So clearly, social context makes a huge difference in terms of how you think, how you behave. And I didn't even mention who the other person is, which you can then imagine, like, all the different variations on it's your spouse versus it's, I don't know, grumpy cat, whatever, right? A grumpy cat's not a person. But it's also defined by the environmental context. So here's a way to understand how environmental context makes us think a certain way. So imagine any conference room anywhere in the world. You guys probably have a bunch of them. There's 12 people in the room trying to have a meeting. One's at the board or the projector trying to run the meeting. The other 11 are doing what? A lot of them are on their laptops and phones. And if you were to like tiptoe behind all these laptops and phones and kind of see what's up, you'd be like, email, Facebook, browsing the web, email. I don't even want to say what that is. And it's like, great. And then it's like, this is any normal meeting anywhere. Now, environmental context, imagine same meeting, same people, same agenda, but you take away the chairs. Now, if you want to be that person, you're like this, right? Now imagine same room, same agenda, same people, and then you take away the table. Now you just pretty much need to be an asshole. You're like, oh yeah, I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes on the meeting. No, you're not taking notes on the meeting. That's ridiculous. Now, there's nothing that changed about the people. There's nothing that changed about the meeting agenda. It's actually the room made those decisions for you, right? So think about the difference between interviewing a customer in a usability lab, which is like no room I've ever been in my house, right? Like cameras everywhere, one-way mirror. It's like very weird to compute in that space. Versus we just pretended this was a retail space. And there was like enough in there that we could start to have these naturalistic interactions where you like came up and assisted him and you found a product together and you guys were actually computing in time and space together. Which is why when you guys try to understand your products, don't keep it abstract at all. Go and figure out some specific instantiations in time and space and live out those instantiations because that's how people are actually going to go compute your software. They're not going to go compute it abstractly or by looking at your specs or in an environment that is anything like a usability lab. And this is also why we go to naturalistic environments like the mall or the DMV. Like these are like regular people in real environments. And like what's actually happening in the DMV, a lot of people are on the browsers on their phone. I mean, it really is a Firefox environment, right? Like you don't think about that. You're not like, oh man, I can't wait to hit the DMV segment. But like that's actually how people use your product, right? So like go and see the stuff naturalistically. Go see the lines of force that are your product in the world. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's it. It's like 9:58. Is there like one more question? I don't know. That's all the things.
No, I think, thank you so much, Tom. So quickly, I'd like to give a huge hand to Tom. Please give.
Yay.
We wanted, as a gesture of our gratitude, we wanted to give you some gifts. First of all, certainly some Mozilla, a little bag for you to carry some stuff, and there's swag inside because this is Mozilla. So swag is kind of part of the deal. Let us know how it operates in your real-world experiences. We'd be very curious.
I would tell you. This is awesome.
And then the second gift is really just because it's you. But we have someone at Mozilla who works at a very cool company called Dodo Case. And Dodo Case made a VR viewer that you may be aware of. And they did. Exactly. They made a cardboard for their cases. So this is care of Dodo Case. And you may have something similar already, but we thought it would be fun. And then this was from a Kickstarter campaign that they did to raise money to create that. So you get additional swag too.
I went from 0 denim hats to 1 denim hat.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think we're done.
Go forth and prototype.
Yeah. Go make a bunch of stuff, I guess. Thanks, everybody.